G'day everybody. Today got a special treat for you all. We filmed a little while ago a podcast with John, who is one of the directors here. He's the head of research, as well as Pranjal and his wife Archana. And Pranjal is the head of technology here at Investmentor. And the three of them had a bit of a chat, just discussing Pranjal and Archana, their journey to Australia and their property journey when they started here. And it's an awesome story. I love hearing it every time, so we thought we'd share it with you. It was filmed a little while ago before we had this room together, but it's such a great story, we didn't want it to go to waste. So I hope you guys all enjoy it, and let us know what you think. Thanks.
You destroyed their sink.
Oh, sorry. Well, meet my friends, Pranjal and Archana. Also, now, property investors in Australia. And I guess a good place to start is, how long have you actually been in Australia?
6 years now.
6 years. Okay, so actually when you look at that to me anyway, that's like relatively new. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We're sort of transitioning from that new to settled.
Yeah. So 6 years coming to Australia. And I think, by the way, guys, it's a good thing to note is, before coming to Australia, these guys had actually never been overseas.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I guess, what was that big decision? Because that's a very big life decision you make. You've never been overseas, and then you're going to just change and then bring your entire life to a totally new country, restart from the beginning. What made you decide that? Normally, a lot of people do want to come, but especially if you've never been overseas, that's a ballsy type of decision.
Yeah, I think we were at similar stage in our careers back in India. So we are both software engineers, been working in the industry back at that time around 10 years, so 8 to 10 years. And we both are working pretty hard in our respective jobs. But there were things like that unsettled us, lack of recognition, lack of opportunities. So I told her one day, like, we are working hard as it is. Might as well work hard in a dollar economy. So she said, yeah, I've always been excited about, discovering another country.
Mm-hmm.
And back at that time, you and I were working together. So I was building software for your company from back in India.
Yeah, I remember those days fondly.
Yeah. So, it was you who planted that seed in my head. The one casual conversation, you just said, hey, why don't you relocate here? And that triggered the whole barrage of emotions in my head, like, is it even possible? How do people do that? What are the risks involved? And it's by the looks of it, it's a crazy thought. Pack everything that you have built here and just transplant yourself in entirely new country. But we were aligned on that part. Like, the idea was just to take a calculated amount of risk. So I told her, let's go explore it for a few years. If it doesn't work out, we can always come back.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's the thing. Like, I think you were the one that told me this, how tough the competition for IT in India is. Like, even just to relocate to come overseas, and probably a lot of people can relate to this, especially coming from your country, is you really have to be at the top of your game, because how many people become software engineers in India?
Yeah, to be honest, when we completed our university, just in our year, it was 400,000 students who, completed the degree with us.
Yeah.
So it was quite a competition there, I would say.
Yeah. So you really already have to be one of the top, and then out of the top, you have to now come to Australia, and then there's all those tests you have to do in Australia just to be able to pass. So then a very small percentage actually make it.
Back then, the cutoff for Australian PR visa was still quite low. So it was hovering around 65, 75. If someone
Are you talking
set
about points?
points
Point
based
system.
visa, yeah. So if someone set their minds to it, they could still do it back then, 2015, 2016. Now it's nearly impossible. The cutoff has gone from 100 to 110. You have to be exactly the right age, score exactly the perfect score in English. You have to be PhD and with 10-year work experience. It's getting more and more difficult now.
Yeah. But on the flip side to that, if the strictness of coming to Australia becomes harder, it just, to me, it just means the ones who are coming here are starting off on very high incomes.
Yeah,
Is that correct? Like they would start in companies that require that. So what would like the minimum start of someone coming to Australia would be from your...
Well, things have changed drastically in past few years. So back then, the right starting salary for someone with about 8 to 10 years of experience could have been anywhere between 95 to 115,000 per year. But now that the skill shortage is very severe, even newcomers are able to negotiate much higher salaries. So, things have changed a lot.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So coming to Australia, obviously me and you met at the airport. Pranjal looked like a lost puppy dog at the airport. It was really funny. It's like looking around, it's like a totally new environment.
It was a sensory overload for me, especially the visual stimulus. Most of these things we have only seen in movies.
Okay, I'll stop you there for a second. So coming to Australia, the only thing you actually kind of witnessed before that's something similar was from the movies.
Yeah.
And then you land here and then it's just like the movies.
Yeah. And there was
How weird would that be?
There was a very famous movie back at that time, Dil Chahta Hai. Our generation actually reveres that movie, and a lot of those scenes were shot in Sydney. So we could literally recollect that, we have seen these scenes. So for that first, 1 or 2 days, it was definitely an overload for me, taking it all in, things that we haven't seen
Well,
before.
I could see you at the airport, like looking around, like with his
I
backpack, and it's just like going like this.
I still remember the one thing he mentioned was the pedestrian crossing. Like, how cool is that? Cars actually stop for you while you're crossing the road. I'm like, okay,
Cars stop
wow.
for you. Yeah.
I can't shake off that scene when Jane pressed that button, and it was pedestrian green, and the car stopped to let us go.
Is that why you were like going like? You were like hesitant in crossing the road. It was already green.
Because back in my city, you got to watch out for yourself. There's no walkways separately for pedestrians, and you just fend for yourself.
Yeah. So you come here and then you arrive in Sydney, the northern beaches of Sydney.
Yeah.
Was that a different experience?
Oh, big time. I still remember you driving me through. It's like after I've spent few days in northern beaches, you drove me through the western suburbs, and you then asked me, okay, where would you like to live? And I was like, is that even a question? Of course, northern beaches.
Well, the reason I do that is because for new people coming into Australia, you don't have a basis to go off.
Yeah.
You don't have it. So when you arrive in Australia, the only thing you can do is you can Google where most people live or whatever, or you may know someone, a family, a friend, and majority of the time, especially, well, it's a fact that a lot of people from India arrive around like the Parramatta region.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was actually get you guys, it was like the initial seed to plant, which was, in Australia, you still get to pick where you want to live. It's not really a matter of, this is the only place I can go to, or this is the place I can afford. It is, you can decide which area. But obviously, coming here, you won't know any of the areas. So by driving you around, you'll get to witness firsthand what is the difference between this area, this area, this area.
That's right.
And then that's the question was, where would you want to live?
That's right.
And if you pick the Northern Beaches, where you live now, what's the reasons for that? Compared to where a lot of other people maybe migrate to the west, they go to places that like Parramatta or things like that, right? So apart from the beach, what is it?
I think I'm generally stubborn to break the script, whatever that is. And I knew the script most of the Indian migrants follow. Okay, you know someone and then they tell you to settle in a certain suburb and because it's got certain good schools or whatnot. So first thing I was pretty sure about is if I am relocating abroad, it needs to feel like abroad.
Yeah.
It shouldn't feel like, another suburb in India. So that was the stubborn part of me. And apart from that, the demographics and the balance in, various nationalities. So the closer it is to the natural distribution of population in Australia, the better. So that's what encouraged me. Northern Beaches was generally never been as crowded as some of those suburbs that we checked out. So that was one of the reasons. I think hindsight is a bitch. You can go back and justify your decision, but back then, whatever little we knew, based on that, we just took a call and said, okay, let's roll with it.
Yeah, that leads me to this point now, because you're still renting here in Northern Beaches. But now you've been here 6 years. It's like you've learned a lot. You've learned so much. You've learned about properties. What do you think about the property prices where you live?
It's a premium market.
Premium market.
Yeah. There's an exclusivity to it. There's very limited land supply, because the further north you go, that's basically the peninsula. You can't manufacture more land. It is what it is. And I noticed there's a lot of old money here. The further north you go from here, big houses, intergenerational wealth. So that gives it some sort of exclusivity. And that's why the prices are literally skyrocketing.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, because at the time when we were going through you living in DY was the time when I was heavily involved in property. You guys know that. So now that you knew the property price, and at least there's some understanding about, you've just said limited land supply, there's a feeling of exclusivity. And that's without even knowing about property, but it's just the general feeling you get. So the question really is, when you arrived, wasn't your dream to have a place here?
Yeah.
Most people would.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
Because as a new migrant, and maybe you guys correct me if I have this wrong, when you first arrive in Australia, apart from work, apart from kids' school, ultimately somewhere in the back of your mind, were you guys saying to yourselves, we should buy our own place, or we should settle down somewhere, wherever? Did that ever come to your head?
Yeah, it did. And back then it was clearly
I'm talking back then.
Yeah. We knew that the prices are in this range.
Yep.
And what would it take for us to have a place here? And that was looking like, a few years worth of savings, and then maybe we can get a place here.
Yeah. So let's actually go back. This is important because this brings you back to how you were thinking. Now, I know there's this general thing about, hey, here's some savings, here's a few years. But did you actually break down how long it would take you to get into a property here in the Northern Beaches? How long would it take you to save money?
Well, we never sat down and discussed, let's find the property and calculate our savings capacity, because back then it felt like a very remote dream. It was not even a point.
10 to 15 years worth of saving, and then because every every house that we saw was over $1 million or something like that.
Yes.
So, just 10% deposit or
Yep.
20% deposit might be
100, 200,000.
200,000.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
back then we started with pretty low salaries.
Yeah.
And this is something I'm pretty emotional about, is that when we came here, there was no one who was before us that we knew in software industry who could tell us that, don't accept this salary, you deserve more. Or this is how you crack the interview. So we had to traverse that journey ourselves. Had somebody told us, we would have, short-circuited that journey. We could have saved maybe 3 years off this whole thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, this was a good experience, and that makes me very passionate about, paying it forward. So I make sure that all the other newcomers that are arriving here, if they are somehow connected to me, I make sure that they don't fall into the same slow lane trap.
Because that is a lane that is probably 90% of people, it happens to them. When you're a new migrant, because settling down in a country, just from people I know and the experience that they've said is, when you come to Australia, you settle down to people is 2 or 3 years. And when they mean by settle down is kids are settled in the school, they've settled in the location, they've met friends, they've settled in their work.
Yep.
So already that settle down period is already 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So you've come to Australia, and most people, how old were you when you came?
30,
34, 35.
32, 33?
31.
31, okay. That's about, that's the average age.
Yeah.
So by the time you settle down, it's 34,
33,
right?
34.
And then it comes back to the question again about, like I asked you, you never went into details about how I'm going to buy a property here. It was just a dream.
Yeah.
So you would think about it, but how often do you think about it in a week? Did you think about it often? Or maybe when you drove down the street and you see a house, it might say for sale. That might trigger you. Something like that. But it's not in your mind. So you can wipe another 1 or 2 years from that. So you think about that. You come here at 31. The time you get serious about really doing it is 36, 37 years old. Right? And that's the point of when a lot of people come here. And then when you see prices in Northern Beaches at those prices, and what was your initial thoughts? Wow, it's
Yeah.
expensive.
Yes.
So that is what makes people move.
Yeah.
So when I first asked you, in the very beginning, when you first arrived here, where do you want to live? You said Northern Beaches. But in that time frame, if nothing had happened, you may not be here.
That's right. And
You may be over there.
That goes back to the whole script about location and about the acceptable income, because these are the things you hear from people around you. If someone says it's okay to live in a far-off western suburb with a very hot and humid climate and very crowded atmosphere, and it's okay for you to accept a 90,000 per year job, that becomes your new normal all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So that's the script I think most of the newcomers should attempt to break. First off, by choosing a different location, and second off, by listening to someone who's doing reasonably well in that industry. For us, it was IT industry. But if someone tells you, hey, this is a median salary, you should accept it, that's what your result is going to be eventually.
Yeah, I still remember the time when you said that a lot of your workmates were buying houses.
Yeah.
Over in the northwest of Sydney,
Yep.
all of those areas over there. Wouldn't that make you think to do the same thing?
Yeah, it would. But by that time, we had already entered this investment circle.
Yes.
So the discussions were different now.
Yeah.
They were more empowering, and they were more result-oriented discussions rather than just getting an emotional release of having my own house and a backyard kind of thing.
Yeah. So let me fast forward that now, because the context really was if you had done nothing, your path, I guess, may have been a house in a place that you can afford.
Mm.
That's the
That's right.
general
Yeah.
thing that happens.
True.
Right? So to a lot of new migrants, I always ask is, what is the actual opportunity when you arrived in Australia? Apart from better healthcare system, probably, than India, I'm not sure. Is it yes, no? I'm not sure. You can talk about schooling, you can talk about like many different things, but what is the opportunity really could you see yourself here? Because I had a different outlook of what you guys could do. But maybe you guys didn't see that outlook yet. But I always knew that you could get there. But you just have to see that what was the actual opportunity for you.
True.
Yeah. So maybe was it to just work, save money? Like, did you have a plan at all? Say after 2 years, did you have a plan?
After 2 years, I think there's a very clear before and after.
Yeah.
Was there? Yeah.
When we had the investment discussions with you and other guys, and there was a clear before. So before we were just, letting it go by, just focusing on surviving and focusing on the next day. We actually did not have a set plan, even about the relocation. Relocation was more about running away from there rather than running towards here.
Just trying,
exploring. Let's see what happens, of approach. But after we came here, we realized that it's not always a cakewalk, especially in terms of rising up in your career and getting used to this work culture and stuff. But we were open enough to learn all of it, and the hustle part, do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So, but then the investment discussions started happening, and that triggered a whole new, trajectory in the thought process as to, we now definitely need to sit down and decide where we are going to be 10 years from now. We can't just keep floating around.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back. That conversation started, I think, from memory, was we had a very similar discussion to what we're having now about new migrants coming in and what is the opportunity they have. And what I did notice, and probably what I said to you, was a lot of people who come here becomes kind of victims of their circumstance. So they relocate their entire lives to a different part of Sydney because that's what they feel their circumstance warrants.
Dictate. Yeah.
And that's what it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think the difference was to sit down with you and see that, okay, forget about your circumstance, because you can dictate your circumstance.
Change. Yeah.
Rather than what your circumstance is now you have to leave in the place that you don't want to live just because of that. So it's a matter of saying, okay, one day you want to buy a house in Northern Beaches, and I think that is still one of your goals, right?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
The question is there a way to get there, a different path to get there, rather than trying to save up for the next 6-7 years for that 100 to 200,000 deposit, or rather for you than to relocate. So those options now were put onto the table, and then now it's really your judgment on, okay, this is what I want to do. And going back to your point, hustle, hard work, your conviction in saying this is the path. So that's probably what we're going to run through.
Yeah.
Like, what made you decide that I'm not going to buy my home, I'm not going to relocate, I want to stay here renting, which a lot of people don't do, because new migrants inherently want their own place
As soon as possible.
as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's not just from India. I'm talking about Filipinos, I'm talking about most Asian countries and stuff from those areas. Come here, and the first thing they want to do is, I want to buy my own home.
Yes.
So that feeling, emotional feeling, is very strong. Okay? So you needed to take that feeling out and say, I'm going to rent in DY, but I'm going to end up buying my own place here, but I'm going to take a different way to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the whole thing, which now you did.
It's a very, I would say, primitive feeling. Like you can't override it easily.
Yeah.
Like
I remember.
every time you
Archana.
drive by a house that you looked on, and you like, and most of the people would say, "Oh, I wish I could buy it.
Yeah.
I want to buy it as soon as possible." Those kind of feelings. So rent vesting is actually a special case of investing, like very niche. We have to have a certain kind of conviction to keep renting and keep investing on the side. So our preferences were pretty straightforward. We didn't want to leave the area. So if you can't buy, there's no harm in keeping to rent here in the area. Stay with the friends and the whole circle that we have built. Our son wouldn't have to change schools, so his friendships he could retain. So and we realized there's no harm. Like you could potentially keep renting forever for convenience, because you keep living in the area that you prefer.
Yeah, but it was really hard to accept the fact that we are paying our hard-earned money to someone else in
As a
rent.
rent, yes.
So that was, yeah.
That's what everyone goes through when they decide this path.
Yeah.
Is exactly what you said.
Yeah. Because
we are paying someone else.
It is taught to us like throughout our childhood and our teenage, and like you don't want to pay someone else, right? If you have to pay, just save it for your own thing and you get your own house. Like
yeah, the general narrative is the same.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm paying this much in rent, might as well pay a little bit more towards my own house.
Yeah.
But I realize most of the beliefs around money and wealth building, they almost always come from the kind of environment we had growing up. What types of discussions we heard when we were growing up? Most probably in parents, near family, teachers, the most influential cohort. And if you critically look back, most of those people are not wealthy by definition. So now you come at a juncture where you have to break apart from your own, set things. And that's the most difficult part to break, because these are our heroes. These are our, parents. How is it possible for you to love your parents and still say that they were not financially savvy, or they made not the right decisions as far as wealth is concerned?
Well, look, that's the same thing even when I look back at my parents, because when I look back now, it's actually probably the best education you could have. If you think about their journey and their path, it's very easy to look back and say, my parents did well. They've got a house, maybe it's fully paid off, whatever, maybe they're on a pension, whatever it is. So it's very easy to create that narrative that, man, my parents, they did all right. Look, they have a house in Northern Beaches, right? But if now you know a little bit more, and you think back, and I've asked my parents this, is tell me the time when you had a chance to sell your property. When was the time you had a chance to invest? At which year did you not invest? Which year did someone offer you an investment and you said no? So I just take it back, okay? And then you analyze that, and then you could see their path not taken and where they are today. And then you ask, is this where I want to be? It's the best educator. But every single one of us who have those type of parents have to look back and ask them these questions, because there's no use in just thinking about, hey, my parents are like this. I ask myself, how did they end up like this? And then take it back. They're all the lessons you learn so that you know.
Yeah, and we didn't even tell our parents about the investing thing.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise, they would have had a heart attack.
Yeah.
If we told them we have a $1 million worth of loan, debt,
$1 million in
debt. Yes, they would have, at least one of the four would have had a heart attack. Okay, so a lot of times I've noticed the migrants, their support system is all back home. So anything happens here, they're going to pick up a phone and call someone back home. So it's sort of like a backseat driving being done from India. So your parents or your cousin tells you, oh, investing is risky, don't do that. Oh my God, $1 million worth of debt, blah, blah, blah. And then they take their feet off the pedal.
Yeah.
And this is one of another behavioral patterns that I suggest recently arrived migrants to break.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you have, for everything that happens here, don't call home. Okay. This
Don't
is
call back home.
also the 30s, mid-30s are the age bracket where you actually have a real opportunity to break free of all the conditioning that you've had since your childhood. This is when you truly start to think on your own feet about what path I'm going to take, and is it going to be radically different to what my parents took.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Yeah, well, it's hard, but it doesn't take, it's quick to get over though, I think. I don't know about you guys. Yes, you could say in a couple of months you've made that decision. You guys decided to invest first. So just to take it back is what you guys did was decided to rent and put your first amount of savings that you had into an investment.
That's right.
A couple of the reasons why. Firstly, the entry point, if you had to buy a house in Sydney or Northern Beaches, that savings that you would have had, it would have been enough. So you would have to keep going. Yeah. So I think the question was at that time was, whatever you have now, what can you do with it? Now that you decided to rent and then invest. My question to you was at that time, do you have a deposit?
Yeah.
And what was the answer?
No.
Okay, so you have no deposit.
Yeah.
Now, we went through the whole, we would say dream building, but it was more a session about a realization of what you can become and what you can do in the next 10 years.
And more importantly, why that's important.
Yes, why?
And I think the end goal was the retirement. I can still recall the whole conversation that, okay, if this is the day and this is the year you want to retire, what sort of lifestyle you want. And then you did some numbers and you came up with that big amount, and we were looking at each other like, okay, even if we save super, even if we just save everything, or maybe one of our salaries,
it's not going to get us there.
not going to get us there.
Yeah.
So.
And even buying your own home at that time
wouldn't
get you there.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So investing was looking like the only viable option that could get us there in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the why was very clear, why we wanted to do it, and once that is clear, you get into some sort of a, you flick a switch in your mind. Instead of looking for excuses not to do something, you start looking for ways to make it happen. So that deposit question came then. So the first property required $58,000 for deposit. And back at that time, when we pooled everything together, it was 25-ish.
So your savings was about 25,000.
20, yeah. So not nearly half. So then the next question was, we do want this. How do we make it happen? And so once you go down that path of execution, it's fairly easy to see the options emerging pretty quickly. So we could ask our family, we could ask her to borrow money from our friends, or the perceived riskier option is to take out a personal loan. And that was a very conscious decision that we did together. Knowing that we have recently arrived in Australia, we realized that we will always be behind that opportunity. So opportunity comes and we don't have enough deposit because we've only had like 2 years worth of savings. And most of it was actually not saving. So we realized this is going to be a repeating pattern unless we find a way to break it. So opportunity is now. You have to have the money now and cover up that gap by saving aggressively in next 3 to 6 months. So that's when we said, let's take a personal loan to fill this gap, and we should save aggressively, systematically to pay it off over next, let's say 1 or 2 years. So essentially we just reached out to a number, concluded a number. This is how much we are going to pay in interest for that personal loan. that number still looked something to us that we could swallow
Yeah.
in return for grabbing this opportunity.
Yeah.
Other ways might have been very difficult. To let this opportunity go and then wait for another year and wait for the next one.
Save more.
Yeah, save more and wait for the next one. So we just flipped the time equation just by plugging the gap.
Yeah.
By, some people do it with high risk, high interest rate instruments. Others just borrow from friends and family.
Yeah.
But the core idea is do whatever it takes to start your clock now.
Yeah.
You plant your property now. It's like a tree. So it's going to grow with time. So time is your real currency. The sooner you can acquire, the better.
Yeah. How did you feel, Archana, when the options were put out there that you didn't have enough at that time for the property that you wanted? You wanted to invest in it. The numbers were there. It fit your budget. Plus, it fit your borrowing capacity. But the caveat, I guess, was how are you going to come up with that extra 20,000?
Yeah, I think as like Pranjal said, there was a couple of options, but then I think we just sat down and we did our numbers in terms of the personal loan, and we knew that we are not going to just stay with that personal loan for 5 years or 7 years, because we also knew that our savings capacity was good, and we were doing okay with our careers, and as soon as we started getting the savings, we actually put it back in personal loans, and that's when it went like quickly down. And the other thing was also that the settlement date is not like 6 months, it was like 2 years.
2 years.
And that was a sufficient time to get another 10% plus just getting rid of all the debt.
Yeah.
So I think we did pretty well in terms of just working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
And I think that was
Well,
important.
I think the part of that though is, the main part of that is not many people would have done that, because especially when you're new in Australia, the traditional thinking is I need to save more. Most people.
That's right.
So if you went by that way, you would have spent another 1 or 2 years just to try to save more. So really, I know that was back then, and there was probably nerves and whatever around it, but there was an execution plan to do this.
Yes.
It wasn't something that's, hey, let's just do it. It was, this is how much you're going to get out. This is how we're going to start repaying it, and then save up for settlement.
Yep, that's right.
I think my next question very quickly, Pranjal, is if you look back from that one property now, and you did that, and I know we've fast forwarded another 3 or 4 years, whatever, since you got it, was that a good idea? When you look back now,
Yes, it was.
because a lot of people would have told you that is such a bad idea.
Yes.
Yes, of
Don't
course.
get this personal loan. Don't do this. Don't grab that. Like even our group of friends, if I said that to them, they would be like, "That's such a bad idea.
Yeah, that's
Don't
right.
do it."
Yeah.
If I told my parents, they'll tell me don't do it.
This is the good part about being a migrant. In a new country, you start from a blank slate. You don't have people constantly whispering in your ears what you can or cannot do, or what you should or should not do. You basically choose your circle, and that kind of dictates your end result. So we obviously kept it hush hush because we knew that this is a risky, ballsy move. People are going to just discourage us from doing it.
Yeah, I remember I mentioned to one of my colleagues, and in the office.
Work colleagues?
Yeah, work colleagues.
Were they also migrants?
Yes.
Yes.
And he was migrated here like 15 years ago.
Yep.
And he's living in Western Sydney. And he told me about, he just asked me that, okay, what's your plan for the house, and it's been already 2 or 3 years that you are here, and I haven't told him before that I am actually in the investment side of it and not the other side. And I told him, oh, you know what, I'm planning to go for the investment property, and he told me all the negative side of investment, of not living in Western Sydney, and
Well,
and he was like kind of discouraging the fact that you are in the wrong spot and you are doing everything wrong. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I think I just need to take a break and not listen to
so
you at
what
all.
was? Did he give you any advice on what to do?
Oh yes, he just said.
What was his advice?
He said, "Oh, I think you need to save and you just move to Western Sydney. It's so much cheaper, and you can get a big land and you can have your own house, and it's been 15 years for him to acquire his first property, like just then
Oh,
at
really?
the same time when I was doing my investment settlement, like Hamilton, and
Yeah.
he was doing his own home-owned
Yep.
property, and he was so proud of it. But then he was also telling me that it was an old house and he needed to renovate, and he's putting extra 100K in that. And in my mind I was like, oh my god, this is so much of work. I can't even imagine, like, without
Doing
having
this.
any connections, or how are you going to do that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good example. Look, he's your work colleague. He's been in 15 years. He's just now getting to his first property.
Yeah.
That's a very common story.
Mm.
Now, you invested within the first 2 years of being a migrant.
Mm.
That's
Okay,
right.
that is also an uncommon story.
Yeah,
That is an uncommon story compared to the common story.
that's
Yeah.
right.
And you had to get a personal loan just to get your first one, which 90% of people you would have asked, even if you went to financial advisors, even if you went to people who's been in banking or whatever, most likely they would have said this is not good.
Yes.
But now you think back, I'm not talking about your other portfolio. I'm talking about that one property, just the one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now you look back, has that property done well for you?
Oh, pretty damn
Yes.
good. It has grown by around 120,000 in valuation. We're going to do the refi pretty soon.
Yeah.
And it's been
And
just 2
the other
years.
question is though, in the years that you've owned that property, how much money of your own money have you put in to repay the mortgage?
Because that was interest only, so
Yeah.
we haven't put anything. We did these calculations before choosing that property. So the whole cash flow calculation
Yeah.
and how much is going to go out of our pocket.
Yeah.
So it was cash flow positive from day one.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
no big deal.
Yeah. So it took a personal loan to get that property. It's probably grown 120, 150,000 in paper. So on paper, you are now 150,000 more
Yeah.
compared to your debt.
Mm.
And it hasn't cost, it's cash flow positive, so it hasn't cost you anything. So was that $20,000 or $25,000 loan worth it?
Oh, well worth it.
Yeah.
Right?
If
So
you-
I know you're saying that, but let's just go back and tell all those people who said to us, this is such a bad idea. I wonder what they're doing right now. And it always makes me think about that. Like, so going from that, that taught you a lot because, guys, they did it again.
Yeah. So this is like a muscle, you know. Your ability to take calculated amount of risk as a couple. This part of the story almost always gets underplayed a lot, but it takes two to tango. The couple has to be truly aligned with where they are headed, and then you'll see the results come out pretty quickly. Otherwise, people pulling in different directions and ending up nowhere. This is because people are not, as a couple, they are not fundamentally aligned and agreed on what we are going to do and how we are going to do it. So that agreement is the core of it. And this was the opportunity that came. It was a long settlement, so around 5 years, 4.5 years settlement. It's going to settle later this year.
Yeah, and every time whenever I talk to not only that just one colleague, but anyone else, that okay, the sunsetting,
Yeah, carry on.
the sunset date is like 4 years from now or 3 years from now, they always, give me some kind of scare that it never happens and you are going to just waste all of your money, it's not going to work for you and things like that. But yeah, touch wood, I didn't have any that kind of experience. As
The plan is risky in that regard, that you always have to work with very well reputed developers, and this is like going to any world championship or Olympics. You can't just rock up there with your gym bag. You have to go there with your team, your physio, your coach, your support system, and your everyone basically. So when we are doing these kind of discussions, it almost always feels like just us somehow miraculously pull this through, which is not true. If the team was not there, and if the coaching was not there, we couldn't have done as well as we did.
Yes, I agree, but also, look, guidance and the people you listen to, it's a choice you make.
True.
It's not because I could have given you advice. Luke and Jacob could give you advice. Books can give you advice. YouTube can. So all of this you can listen to. Work colleagues, right? So really, I always put it down to there's people out there that can help guide, and yes, you do need the team, right? But ultimately, you decide who's that team. So I always put it back to the people who have achieved it and said, yes, it's important to have a team, but 80% or more of that is still on you. You made that choice. You decided to do that. You decided to get the personal loan, right? No one put a gun to your head and said, you got to do this. Right? And that takes you to think about, it takes you to rethink the way you've always thought. So, I agree, Pranjal, but also more of it is on you guys, I think.
And the sheer ability to, stop analyzing at certain point and then pulling the trigger. That is such an underrated ability. People could spend years analyzing something that they want to do and still end up sitting on the fence or never doing it. But there comes a point where you have to gather all your courage and do it. Pull the trigger. Just sign that contract or deposit that money. So for you to be able to do that, obviously your why is important. Our why was very clear. We wanted to, have certain amount of passive income by a certain date in future. But then you also need to know your stakes. How much you're, willing to risk it. What sort of beliefs you're willing to break. What sort of people you're willing to listen to. And when it comes time to take that shot, taking that shot.
So look, in the end, they ended up getting 2 personal loans to get those 2 properties. But in that period, just by doing that, changed not only the way you thought, but also changed the behavior of saving money. It became much more aggressive, focused, and then you started understanding very quickly that opportunities just come and go very quickly. Do you want to take that chance? Take that opportunity. So before we continue, I think the good thing to note now is how many properties now, since you've been here for 6 years, do you actually have? Do you know? Archana,
that question.
Let me test you.
So the 5th one is under the build right now, Minangal Park. So officially 5th. 6th we are settling in May this year, and 7th is later this year. Out of these 7, the first one was a joint venture. So we are just a servicing partner in that one. We don't completely own it. And another one is through our self-managed super fund. So by the end of 2023, that's 7.
So let me just combine all that. 6 years in Australia, you had to start off with 2 personal loans. Your first one you got settled 2 years later. The second personal loan you got it hasn't even settled. But in between the first one and the last personal loan, you've managed to get 5. in between,
Yeah.
right? Now,
And we have also gotten rid of all the personal loans.
Personal loans are
so we
paid
don't
off
have
already.
and all the personal loans have been paid off.
Yes.
Now, so you tell someone that, like anyone, in 6 years in Australia, with the 2 personal loans, that even the last one's not even complete, and in the middle you got 5, and you've learned how to invest your SMSF, you've done a joint venture, right? And then the question was, how are you now getting deposits for those 5 in between, knowing that you're still settling? I put this down now because without starting with those loans and without doing your one, there is no way you do these 5, because it's a thinking mentality now.
That's right. That's right.
You
It's,
changed.
it's a way of thinking.
It's a way of thinking.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even limit it to just investing, but how we look at life, and how to approach problems, and who to listen to, who not to listen to,
Yeah.
those kind of things. And overall, we think differently about wealth itself. Like, what does it do? What does it not do? For a lot of people, it's just fancy cars and big mansions. Our definition is different. For us, it's still a certain lifestyle, but at certain point of time in future, that's our definition of wealth.
Yeah.
So the whole way of doing things is different now. I agree. And we know the cohorts of people, and where to bring up which topic and where not to bring up a certain topic.
Yeah. So imagine now, Archana, let's go back to your work colleague, right? And then when was that? How many years ago did you speak to him?
It was 2018, I guess.
1920, so 4 years ago. And then at the end of this year, if you have a conversation with him and he's still with his one property renovating, maybe, and then you've just told him you've got 7 investment properties, what do you think he'd actually say? Would he now be doing, oh, you're doing it all wrong, you've got it all wrong, and all this?
Yeah, you
or
don't
so much
understand
debt.
you have so much of debt.
You have so much debt.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's 2 ways to look at this. You can ask him, and he might say, you have so much debt, you're doing what's wrong. Or you can ask someone else, and they say, wow, 7 properties.
Yeah.
How did you manage that? Because in between the first property and this last one that's settling now, the questions we always had is, every time I showed you an opportunity, and it looked good, and it fit the cash flow and everything, it wasn't a question of, I don't have enough,
Yes.
or I don't. Your always question now was, okay, let's figure out a way
How to make it
how to get this.
How to make it happen.
So then we would sit down and find ways. Is it now? And because you've experienced personal loan, that was always on the table now.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
nothing is really too much of a not option,
True.
because it's there. We could say, hey, you could get another personal loan, but can we take equity out of this place?
Existing, yeah. Even the Khan's one was interesting, because with Khan's one, which is settling in 2 months, we didn't have deposit. So we asked, okay, we wanted, can you talk to the developer to give us some time? So let's say pay 5% now and 5% in 6 months. And miraculously they agreed. So
Yeah, exactly.
we booked that one as well. That was a very rare opportunity
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Gold Coast, water facing.
Yeah. And then we found one in Melbourne, remember this one? Where, because we were able to find a big rebate back, you almost didn't have to put anything into the deal.
That was not even part of the plan actually. So
Yeah.
we set out
Yeah, that wasn't
a
part of the
certain
plan.
It just came flying out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think I came to Pranjal and said, hey Pranjal, this seems like a really good deal. It seems like you're not going to have to put much money in.
Yeah.
Then showed it to you, we did the cash flow, it works, and it was like, okay, how do we get it done? So that wasn't even part of this whole structure.
Yeah.
Initially, guys, I want to say this, our plan when we first spoke was 4 properties in 10 years.
10 years, 8 to 10 years. Yeah.
That was, we set that out from the beginning.
Yeah.
Now it's, at the end of this year, it'll be 7 properties in 6. Right? And this doesn't come down to money or, maybe not many people will get to 7, for example. this comes down to the way you think and the way you look at opportunity and how to take action to that.
True.
It almost changes. Now, 6 years to us has gone really fast.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
It's only yesterday I remember picking you up from the airport.
Yeah.
And then now 6 years later, here we are, and you're 7 properties, and you still live in the place that you want to live,
Yeah.
right? And then I go back to you, and then you say, when can you get a place in Northern Beaches? Well, guess what? In a few years' time with your 7 properties, if you sell all of that, potentially you could get one here where you didn't have to save up for then 10 or 15 years for your 10 or 20% deposit.
Or why even sell it? Just take
Yes.
the equity out.
You don't have to sell it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think by late next year, we should have had enough equity built up in this portfolio to be able to put up a deposit here. The question is whether we want to do it this soon or still hold out for a few years, because we're still living the same lifestyle that we wanted. Just a
Yeah.
quick walk to
you're
the
living
beach,
near the beach,
near the friends,
Yeah.
catch up and
your son's
same
school, same thing. So, and that's my point from the very beginning was, it's not a matter, it's not a question of, you having to save money and then moving out to the west or having to stay here. The whole point of it is so that we are in a position that you will have the option that you can live here by either selling your portfolio, taking equity out. Because think about that, 6 years and you can take equity now and have a 10 or 20% deposit for a Northern Beaches place and you still have 7 investment properties.
Yeah, that's right.
If you didn't take that path in the beginning, you would probably still be saving right now for your deposit here.
That's right.
Would you agree?
Yeah,
This is just my
That's
theoretical theory,
that's right.
but
Yeah,
that's what I would have thought.
That's the most well worn out path that most people follow. And statistically speaking, we would hear that kind of opinion more often
Yeah.
than this investment opinion.
Yeah.
And choice is always a good thing. So by next year, we will have a choice whether we want to buy something here for ourselves to live, or keep continuing this rent-vested lifestyle. If we didn't have those assets, it was not even a choice. We just have to do what we have to do.
Yeah. Well, let me say it right now in this podcast that I'll give you a quick strategy right now. There are options. In 2 years' time, out of your 7, or you can't do SMSF, so out of your 6 properties, sell 3 of the properties that grew the most. Okay? Now, before I continue, if you guys remember, where have you bought your properties? Like, tell me the states. How many in each state? Do you know?
So there's going to be, if we include all of them,
All of them.
assuming we are settled
Yes.
late this year. So 2 in Gold Coast, 1 is
2
the
in
joint
Gold Coast.
venture, 2 in Brisbane,
2 in Brisbane,
1 in Melbourne,
2 in Melbourne.
2 in Melbourne, Aspire as well, yeah.
2 in
2 in
Melbourne,
Melbourne and 1 in Sydney.
and 1 in Sydney. So 2 Gold Coast, 2 Melbourne,
2 Brisbane.
2 Brisbane, and 1 in Sydney. Okay, here's the strategy. You want to live in Northern Beaches?
Yes.
Yes? How much is that
Always.
property?
I don't know. 2 million.
$2 million? $200,000.
1.5 to 2
Okay, so you
million,
need, say, 200,000.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say your Sydney one, you sell. You'd make about, if you sold that Sydney one, you'd probably make about 250,000, 300 right now.
yeah. Right now,
If
yeah.
you sell, because someone will buy that for over $1 million,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you bought it for just under 800, so
Under
750, something
800,
like that.
yes.
You sell that Sydney one. You sell, which one?
Gold Coast.
No. You sell Gold Coast. Yes, you're right. Well done, Archana. You sell your Gold Coast one, you probably make, very conservatively, 100,000.
Mm.
Right there is about 3 to 350,000.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so if you sell those 2, you're still left with 5. Now you go buy your $2 million property here, because you've sold, now you've reduced your borrowing, they can now replace your thing. So at the end of next year, if you follow that, your dream could come true, Archana, of having You own a place here in Northern Beaches
Yeah.
with 5 investment properties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you did all this in 7
7
years.
Yeah.
That's the key. In 7 years, this was done.
Yep. But then maybe selling is not even on the radar.
But see,
Yeah.
now look what's changed. I give them this strategy. Now they don't want to sell.
Yeah.
We worked so hard to build this portfolio. Might as well let it grow.
Yeah, but you also want to live in Northern Beaches
Yes.
and
Yeah.
own your own home.
Yeah.
So,
That's something
Yeah.
we're working towards.
so at least, guys, the whole point of this is they have the choice to
Yeah.
do it.
And a lot of times people can't relate. This was the problem with us, at least. So we go to the conferences and somebody shows up on the stage and they say, oh, I got 12 properties, 15, 16, 20.
Yes.
It was very hard to relate with those people. Here we are sitting in the audience. We can't even decide to get our first one. And here's this guy, 12, 16 properties. So it's very important to not just lose the context while fast forwarding this journey, because 7 always started with one at a time, but our investing was always passive. Actively, both of us were actively focusing on the career and increasing the income. So in this time, our careers also grew. We grew as professionals and our income grew, and hence our capacity to save more and settle those properties as the settlements came. So that part of the story almost always is neglected, because you can throw numbers at anyone. This guy has got 10, this guy's got 20 properties, but how did you actually get there?
Yes,
So
and I
this
think
is important.
It's actually the most important part.
Key part. Yeah.
Yeah. And
You
I
won't get
think,
to these numbers without this part.
And the most intimidating experience was settling the first one, because there were so many unknowns, and we were like, okay, we have to collect this paper, but time is running, bank is
Yeah.
contacting, but then broker is working with us. But then it went smooth because of the team that we were working with.
Yeah, I
So,
think the first one is psychologically the most difficult.
yeah.
It may not be in real life, but you have all these fears in your head, unfound fears. After you have settled your first one, most of those fears are gone.
Yeah.
Or even if they prove to be true, you learn that there are ways to handle it. There's team who can handle it for you. There's insurance and all sorts of safety stops to prevent any kind of catastrophic damage happening to your plan. So after the first one, if you play your cards right, you're pretty much unstoppable, and acquiring at a rate of 1 property per year acquisition, I believe is still possible until you actually exhaust your borrowing capacity, and then you have to come up with different techniques. But it's definitely possible. We never thought we could do it in the beginning, but now we know, looking back, that it's doable.
Yeah, and that's the key. Let's bring that back. This is not just a numbers, like here's 6, 7 properties, whatever. This is about, in that time frame, they actually work their ass off, which means you follow the plan. You follow that. You increase your income. That increases your borrowing. You increase your savings, which means you need to sacrifice a little bit within that time frame, which is why not many people can get to that position where you're in now, because it takes a lot of sacrifice and guts to go out there and change jobs,
Yeah.
change income, go out there and look for different type of ways to earn money. And then also what teaches you in that time frame is how to increase your borrowing.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
What
right.
are the different methods to increase your borrowing?
That's right.
Right? You would not have learned this without even starting it,
That's right.
And all of that you got to factor into a portfolio of 7.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
But I think the very important bit was not like, yes, we did sacrifice and we did like a lot of upskilling and moving in our careers, but we always made sure that we don't burn out ourselves, and we made sure that this doesn't have to be a negative experience. Like looking back, we should not say that, if
It was hard.
if we could if I wouldn't have saved this much, I would have gone to this,
So
holiday or something.
remember
like
when
that,
we were
so.
doing that whole dream casting thing, we were building the end goal, where to go. We've set it out as a clear-cut guideline that we don't need to compromise our lifestyle. Like if we do want to travel once every year back to see our family back to India or any overseas trip, we should still be able to do that. Otherwise, there's this growing resentment inside you that because of this, I have to build this portfolio, I have to sacrifice, and then you get into that whole bitter state of mind. You look at your portfolio in some sort of bitterness that because of this, I had to compromise this. So we made sure we don't have to do that. Otherwise, this won't be a sustainable exercise. You can't keep compromising and not feel bad about having done that.
You don't want to regret it later that, I didn't visit my family, I didn't go for holidays and all those.
But pre-COVID, you guys were traveling.
We traveled. We just came back this.
You went to India, Hawaii, you did all of that.
So it never seemed like a compromise in that regard. We just had to set the goals out there and work diligently towards it without having to sleep hungry kind of thing.
Well, it's been such an interesting last 6 years, seriously. I think for both of us.
Hell of a ride.
Yeah, it's been such a hell of a ride. Like,
thrilling ride.
Who would have thought that, 6 years later, this is... But we set it out from the beginning, and I think currently, I believe anyway, we have kind of achieved that first goal that we really set out to do.
Yeah, that's right. So like an athlete could tell his coach, right? Coach is asking you to run 100 meters, but the athlete says, hey, I can take more, give me 200 meters. So that then it comes to the athlete how much he wants to push himself or herself. And then actually do it. So it's coach is there to facilitate, but you have to play the championship. You have to play the game.
So now that this has all happened to you guys, and you've done the portfolio, you have these options later. Are these the type of, I guess, things that if you had a new migrant coming to Australia, would you tell them this type of story? Because it can be actually unbelievable.
It's unbelievable, but my belief is that people need to know that this kind of story is possible, and it's important for them not to fall into that script or the well worn out path, because if you fall into that trap, you wouldn't even realize, and 10-20 years would be gone. We have a Facebook group of Indians in Sydney, and every now and then I see somebody posting there, hey, I've been here 18-20 years and this is it, and I want to go back. So they actually have nothing to show for those 20 years. That is bad, because you made this big a compromise, left your friends and family and your roots behind to come here, and after 20 years you have literally very little to show for it. That would be an injustice to yourself. So my saying is always like, this is a blank canvas, so nobody's telling you what you can or cannot do, so paint it to your heart's content. Like paint the best picture you can imagine, and then you look back 10-20 years and you said, okay, this was a good ride. Now I have a choice that I want to be a location independent, or do I want to fully retire, or anything.
And last question for me is, it's actually a good analogy you put there, which is, it's your canvas, you paint it how you want it. At the end, it's how it's going to be. But being a migrant, and I get this asked a lot, with 7 properties, for example, how do you now feel about debt?
We feel very empowered.
Because you have a lot of debt.
Yes.
To get 7 properties.
That's right.
Okay, so how does that feel now? Do you feel nervous?
No, I don't think so.
You, Archana especially, this is a good question for you, because normally
she was so anti-debt.
Yes.
No kind of debt. I don't want to owe even a single dollar to anyone. That was her overall philosophy.
It was. but no, like I don't have anything to think about when I'm going to sleep or anything. Like, I believe in our journey, I believe in what I'm doing, and yeah, I think.
But is it causing any like hassles for you?
No.
These are the things that you discuss when deciding to buy a certain property, right? Not after. So you discuss all these things before, how much money it needs, how much it's going to take out of our pocket, put in our pocket, tax return, and depreciation and those kind of things.
Yeah, to be honest, when we started, I had loads and loads of questions and a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowing, black stuff that, okay, I don't know about this. Why am I even doing this? But I think by the time we are reaching 7, it's all like.
Does it feel like clockwork?
Or something?
Second nature.
It's like second nature now.
So the bank lady literally knows us by our face. Like, these guys come every now and then to sign the mortgage papers for refinance or new property.
Yeah.
So they know you, like, oh, here it comes, here's the check, here's the loan book, how much do you need?
So now we think debt is a powerful tool. It's like a sword. You need to know how to wield it first, and then you can wield it to your advantage. So imagine saving $700,000 to get the same Menangle Park property, however long it will take. But because time is your real currency, you'd want to use that debt which is available to you to maximize your outcome. For investors, and we are very hardcore now, we want to put as little of our money as possible in any deal. Like, we are leveraged to that extent. But that's our personal flavor of investing. Some people might not want to leverage that much, but that's fine. This is just, that's how
the way, I mean, it's good now because you don't really kind of even, you get coached in the beginning, but you guys know enough already. Obviously, you have guidance on which property and where, but in terms of the philosophies of debt, leverage, it's second nature.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not as scary as people always thought. Like,
now we don't think of money as a scary topic, or it's not a hard thing to discuss, either at home or outside. It's not a taboo thing. Wealth building is not a hard to reach topic now. We can discuss it from a very informed opinion and a first-hand experience. So it's not a bookish knowledge. We put it to practice, and here are the results.
Well, look, I was there at the beginning on your journey. I'm thankfully still here. Still kicking. But, the word you used before was that would make the opportunity, it would be an injustice if you have nothing to show after coming here and having the opportunity. So it comes back to when I asked, what is the opportunity in Australia? And that opportunity is you can paint your own canvas. You can dictate what you want to do in the next 10 years. It's up to you. You can do that, right? So I guess now you guys are probably, if I can think of any new migrant now coming to Australia, your story is actually the one I tell a lot. Because it's a truth, it's real, like, and I witnessed it from start to finish.
That's right.
No, it's not finished yet, but from start to now, I've witnessed like every property, every transaction, how we got each property, how we got the borrowing, all of that. And it should be saying to new migrants that, yes, like, it happened to these people. It's there, it's out there, it's whether you see it or not. And, I think that's the right word. Don't do injustice to your opportunity in Australia. That's what it is.
I agree.